Welcome back to Collective Practice. I'm Lauren Spalding, and if you're new here, this is a podcast for mental health entrepreneurs where we talk about business skills, clinical skills, and your own mental health. And welcome to today's episode where I wanted to speak a little bit more about IFS, which is a model that I'm certified in, internal family systems therapy, and why I chose it as a social justice oriented therapist. But before we get into today's video, I have a special announcement. I am now an IFS clinical consultant, and I am now offering group and individual consultation for IFS therapists and IFS practitioners. I mostly work with IFS as an individual model just on its own, and also how to externalize IFS with things like sand tray therapy, journaling, art, and I also integrate IFS with EMDR for complex trauma, and I want to be able to offer consultation to therapists around these subjects. So if you're new to IFS and looking for consultation, or if you've been using it for a while and want to start learning how to integrate it, reach out to me and I'm happy to provide some of the services for you. I'm really excited for this to be an addition to my practice, which is all about supporting therapists, and I'm excited to be able to support your clinical growth and your certification in IFS if that's something that you want to pursue. Yay! So let's talk a little bit about why I chose this model in my journey as a therapist and finding my own style and what model works for me. Now, I was raised Mexican American, very much in a collectivist type of family where family system is really important and individualized culture wasn't as much of an impact on me. Of course, it was in that I was raised in white suburbia and raised around a lot of white families, but I also had this idea of family systems growing up. So when I started studying psychology, and a lot of the introduction to psychology was around therapists that were very focused on the individual, I felt a little bit out of place. None of those models really resonated with me, and the individualized work didn't feel as appealing. So initially I thought I was going to work with mostly couples and families. Then moving into graduate school and learning about all the different types of models, I felt more drawn to a person-centered approach, but at the same time, I wasn't quite finding one that felt like an exact match for how I show up as a person and how I saw myself showing up as a therapist. And then I took a trauma course, which I was so grateful to take. I feel like that really changed how I viewed my role as a therapist and how I want to help others. And in addition to that, the professor of that course had a guest speaker who talked about IFS. And I will note, I had been in classes before where I would role play and be a client, and I would often get feedback from the person role playing as a therapist that I was a difficult client or I was very challenging for them, and they had a steep learning curve with me. I didn't mind getting that feedback. I didn't necessarily feel judged by it because I definitely understood. I, at the time, was a very protective person, had a lot of guards up, and my personality showed up in a very different way. And so I kind of almost wore it as like a humorous badge of honor of like, yep, I'm a difficult client. Hopefully I can find a therapist someday for me. And when this guest speaker came and spoke on internal family systems therapy, something just clicked in my mind. And I felt like this is an approach that makes sense for individual work, as well as couple, family, group. You know, it can be used in any setting. But then I got to experience IFS with an IFS therapist and had such beautiful breakthroughs where I could feel the power of this model. So I got trained in a level 1 and got to know even more of my internal system and got to start healing and experiencing the evolution of no longer living so much in a protective state and getting to experience the freedom of reconnecting with who I truly am, who I was and should be beyond my own experiences that led to certain defenses or reactions, and getting to embody Lauren with all of my parts rather than always feeling like I was embodying a part of me. And so that personal experience from an IFS therapist and me being a client and then experiencing a level 1 really solidified that this was my model. I ended up using this model mostly with individual clients and couples. I never ended up extending to family work. And now I mostly focus on individual therapy, and I still find it to be so, so, so beneficial. But I wanted to speak a little bit into how it is beneficial for you as a therapist as well as for your clients. And that's what I love about IFS that's a little bit different from a lot of models, is that you are actually a part of the therapy. You're not this blank slate. You're not where it's all about the client, all about the client. Don't expose any of your reactions. Don't be a person, be a therapist. IFS is very much about recognizing the person you are coming into that session, speaking to parts that are coming up if it's necessary, being able to sit with your parts while you're doing therapy with someone, recognizing how those could be coloring your treatment plan and whether that actually is helpful or not for your client. I mean, there's such a nuance to it that I love and that feels so much more authentic in how I can show up for my clients. So one benefit that I've experienced with IFS is the idea that there's no such thing as resistance. That removes so much responsibility for you as a therapist for your client's healing, because we do sometimes have clients who show up with a therapeutic goal, but a lot of fear around the work it's going to take to reach that therapeutic goal. And so other clients see that as resistance and something we have to help the client overcome so that they can actually get to the healing. But with IFS, we're seeing that as a part of the system, and the system is protecting itself for a reason, and we're not going to just bulldoze through that. We're going to start the work right there with the concerns for parts that are feeling unsure about doing that healing work, or not quite trusting us as a therapist, or the client not even quite trusting themselves. And I love how much that helps someone embrace self-love quicker and embrace an open heart and curiosity towards themselves quicker, because we as a therapist are not communicating that in order for them to heal, they have to change. We are instead helping them connect to that inner self-wisdom that allows for natural change. And we're instead allowing them to connect to their own inner resources that allows for the internal system to naturally want to start shifting and moving around towards healing. And it's so powerful. And I feel that in my own experience and in seeing my clients who are more long-term clients grow, it shows longer and more sustainable growth. With other models that I've used in the past, there is this initial aha moment and there is potential for that change to stick, but it wasn't quite there. And I'm not saying that IFS clients never experience like falling back into old routines or getting triggered again or reactivated. That definitely happens. But I notice that as the work progresses, there's this true shift that happens with clients where they can really feel what it actually means to become who they know that they're meant to be. It's not that you're actually changing, it's that you're getting to really feel who you truly, truly are, regardless of your story, regardless of your upbringing. You get to process that in a way that you get that you invite out your true self more and more and more. And it's just so beautiful, and I love it so much. Another benefit as an IFS therapist is that when you remove responsibility from yourself for your client's healing and instead see yourself as a guide who is helping them access their inner healing and access their inner resources, you have so much more energy at the end of the day. Mind you, you're still tired, like you still worked a hard day, but I could recognize feeling less burnout and less compassion fatigue when I fully invested in IFS and brought that to each session. And I will admit there are times where I haven't had a vacation in a while or I haven't taken a day off, and I'm starting to feel that burnout. And I can notice that that's happening because a part of me will say, I really don't feel like doing IFS and doing interventions. Maybe I'll just listen to my client today. And in the past, I would give into that. Now I know how to sit with that part. But in the past, I would give into that when I was an earlier IFS practitioner. And I realized it was more work. I was realizing that is what leads to compassion fatigue, because you really, really have to like sit with them in it and really be with them in their feelings, versus IFS. It's more powerful for them in self to be able to sit with it. And so I'm guiding them to do that. And there are times where I am expressing empathy, but it feels different. I'm expressing empathy from a self-leadership place, and I'm really allowing myself to sit back and trust their system versus expressing empathy from a part, from that burnout part or that autopilot part. And that in turn feels very exhausting. And oftentimes I'm overworking because I'm really trying to put myself in their shoes. And it's just a shift. It's such a small little shift that you feel, where you are more collaborative and you are more open to your client's experience rather than trying to interpret it, rather than trying to analyze it. And you'll notice there's less energy involved when you are doing the former. And that leads me to the next benefit that I've experienced, especially as a social justice oriented therapist, which is there is a lot less judgment and bias in the room as you learn how to inhabit self energy more and more as a therapist. So that means you're not assuming someone's family dynamics that have shaped their values. You're not assuming what's best for your client. And you're also very open to all types of healing. And of course, there is this loose agenda of IFS of like, what are the steps to healing? But it looks different for everyone. And there's so much nuance that can happen that allows for a break in therapist bias or even prejudice based off of our own history. For me, in my journey as a therapist, I had a lot of imposter syndrome around marketing myself as a therapist of color because I have Spanish blood in my family history, so my skin is very fair. And even though a DNA test would show I'm 100% Mexican and the Spanish blood is from Spaniards invading Mexico, I still felt like, oh, I'm not enough to work with people of color because I don't understand every experience of different versions of racialized trauma, different versions of experienced prejudice and microaggressions, different versions of cultural upbringing. And I felt like I could only see someone who had the exact same story that I did. And through IFS, I learned that it's not about that. It's not about having that exact same ability to walk in their shoes and be step by step aligned with them, but more so, can you, as a therapist, be able to open yourself up to their experience? Or are you tied up in your own biases, in your own history, and letting that color your treatment plan and put a certain lens on it? And so if someone, say, has a different family history than me and they're showing up in their own work, I'm not projecting my own experience on them. I'm not making assumptions. I'm instead sitting in my own self energy and helping them unpack what they are processing, whether it is their own story around racialized trauma or prejudice, whether it is their own processing of cultural upbringing and what feels culturally relevant versus like a legacy burden. They get to figure that out. It's not me imposing it on them. It's not me telling them that's an issue or that feels different from me. So I think that therefore you need to work on that. That happens in other therapy models where therapists are coming in saying, almost advice on what a client should be doing, and their clients are feeling really unheard, really misunderstood, and really hurt by the therapist who's not understanding their background and not listening to the values that are shaped by them based on their upbringing, based on their family, based on generations and their ancestors. And so I'm not saying at all that IFS is free of, prejudice or free of the whitewashing that can happen in psychotherapy. But I am saying that for me, in utilizing IFS, I have been able to unpack how to decolonize therapy and my therapeutic approach in a way that feels really good to me, but more importantly, really good to my clients. And the last benefit to IFS that I have felt as an IFS therapist is that inner work that you're constantly invited to do through the level 1, level 2, and level 3 trainings, through the retreats, and all sorts of opportunities in the IFS community. You get to do your own work as a therapist that allows you to show up better for your clients. And one thing I love about how this is worded or has been spoken to me previously was a lead trainer said, this is not about getting you to mold into a therapeutic model. This is about helping you access the therapist that you're meant to be. Oh, I love that so much because I am so against fitting in a mold. And by learning more and more about this model and getting to experience it more and more, I can say that I have felt that invitation to be the therapist I'm meant to be and to fully embrace how I show up for my clients and how that is right for them and right for me, and how we get to collaborate together in their therapeutic goals. It feels so much better than how therapy felt prior to IFS. And I really loved the way I practiced therapy prior to IFS. I'm not saying anything like super, super negative about it, but it just feels different to practice in this model and in this way, and to really be able to not only be with my parts, but really understand them and help them get to their preferred roles and help any healing that needs to happen so that that's possible. And like I said before, I was defined as a difficult client, really closed off, and just kind of stoic to people. It was kind of like April Ludgate, and I loved it. I freaking love April Ludgate. But I was able to recognize what within that of my personality was just me protecting myself and really rooted in fear, and really rooted in hurt. And I still am that personality. It's not like I changed into suddenly the most bubbly, charismatic person ever, but instead I am able to embrace my personality in a way that feels more self-led and less about protecting myself for fear of rejection or fear of judgment or what have you. And it is different. It is this shift that really matters and makes a lot of sense for what we need in so many different therapeutic issues where clients show up wanting this specific thing, and we recognize it's a lot more complex than that. So if you've been considering IFS, I really, really recommend you check it out. I think you're going to be really pleasantly surprised at how it can impact your practice. I do recommend going beyond an introduction training. I've met so many people where in other trainings, I'll say I'm an IFS therapist, and like, I know all about IFS and all that parts work. It's so much more than just parts language. And if you stop at an intro training, you're not going to quite get it. So I do recommend doing at least a level 1. And then if you love it, see if you can find yourself a level 2, level 3 to attend, where you can go immerse even more in particular topics or really expand on those IFS skills. And as I said, I'm a consultant now, so if you want additional support beyond trainings, I am happy to be able to provide that service for you. I'm currently offering groups that meet either once a month or every other week, or if you want individual consultation, I can provide that service as well. Thanks so much for joining me today. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe. It's free and it's an easy way to support the podcast and help it reach more people. And be sure to share today's episode with a friend, a colleague, or someone who could just benefit from the information. Be sure to follow me on my social medias, where I share even more content for therapists and other mental health practitioners. And check out the Collective Practice membership, where I offer business consultation, clinical consultation, and mindset and self-care work around owning your own private practice. That's everything I've got for you today. So I will see you in the next episode. Bye.